Case summary, case citation, New York Times Company v. United States 403 U.S. 713 1971 decided June 30, 1971 Court, Supreme Court of the United States. Background facts: in 1971, the New York Times and the Washington Post attempted to publish excerpts from a classified document known as the Pentagon Papers, which detailed the United States' political and military involvement in Vietnam from 1945 to 1967. The Department of Justice sought an injunction to prevent the newspapers from publishing the materials, arguing that their release would cause irreparable injury to the defense interests of the United States. Claimant: the United States government. Defendant: the New York Times Company, along with the Washington Post in related cases. Plaintiff: the New York Times Company and the Washington Post. Argument: government's argument. The government contended that the publication of the Pentagon Papers would compromise national security by disclosing classified information, and that prior restraint, preventive suppression, was necessary to prevent grave and irreparable danger to the security of the United States. Newspapers' argument. The newspapers argued that the public had a right to know the information contained in the Pentagon Papers, and that the government's attempt to impose prior restraint was a violation of the First Amendment's protection of freedom of the press. Final outcome: the Supreme Court ruled in a 6-3 decision in favor of the New York Times and the Washington Post. The court held that the government had not met the heavy burden of showing justification for the enforcement of such prior restraint. Law justification. The court's majority opinion, written by Justice Black, emphasized that any system of prior restraints of expression comes to the court bearing a heavy presumption against its constitutional validity. The government thus carries a heavy burden of showing justification for the imposition of such a restraint. The justices noted that the First Amendment's fundamental purpose is to prevent government censorship and to ensure an informed citizenry. The case set a high bar for the government to justify prior restraint, underscoring that national security concerns do not automatically override First Amendment rights. Key concept implication. The ruling reinforced the strong protections for freedom of the press under the First Amendment, limiting the government's ability to impose prior restraints on publication. It affirmed that the press serves the public interest by providing information that the government might otherwise wish to keep secret. Key takeaways. The government must meet a very high standard to justify prior restraint on the press. The First Amendment provides robust protections against censorship, ensuring that the public can be informed about government actions. The decision emphasizes the role of the press as a check on government power, critical to the functioning of a democratic society.